Hello and welcome. My name is Heather. I'm a late diagnosed AuDHDer, which is autism and ADHD combined. And today I want to do a little video. We're going to take a test together about dissociation and how often do you dissociate and exactly what is dissociation. Dissociation is not something that is specifically linked with autism or ADHD. In fact, most people dissociate at some point in their lives or have dissociated and may not even realize that's what they've done. As a matter of fact, how many times have you pulled into your driveway at home after a very stressful day and thought, oh my gosh, I really hope that there were no red lights that I ran because I don't remember how I got here. I don't remember that drive at all. That is dissociation, and it's pretty common to check out during very stressful situations. But if you have a trauma background, you may have more dissociative experiences than you realize. So what exactly is dissociation? It basically is your brain, your nervous system, your body's way of flipping the breaker. You know, in your house, sometimes you will use too many things in an outlet and it'll flip that breaker off and just shut everything off. That's kind of what your body's doing with dissociation. It is trying to protect you. So it's checking out, shutting down. And the way you know that this has happened is you may not remember things that occurred during those moments of dissociation, simply because your body, your brain, and your nervous system is trying to protect you. So they shut you down from that experience. Now, if you're someone with a trauma history or trauma background, you may be very familiar with this experience because if you have experienced continued trauma like CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder, where you were in situations that continued for long periods of time. Maybe in your childhood, there was an abusive household, or even just being emotionally ignored by your parents, things like that. You would learn as a protective response to shut down your experience so that it's not as painful and it's not as difficult to live with. It happens to a lot of people. Especially those with trauma backgrounds. So today we're going to take a little quiz. This is available online. It is at the traumadissociation.com website. I will put a link to the site in the below. And if you want to, you can pause the video now, pull that up, and take the test with me. It actually scores your test at the end, and it'll give you a score and tell you if it's over 30, you have a lot of dissociative experiences. And this is something that psychiatrists, therapists, psychologists, clinicians use to determine not only dissociative identity disorder, but different types of dissociative disorders. Dissociative identity disorder used to be called multiple personality disorder, and it has now changed names to dissociative identity disorder. This is when you have multiple identities and often don't remember huge chunks of life because you checked out while this identity was up front and took place. So this is not necessarily to diagnose anything. This is not to say whether you have DID. This is just a general quiz to see how often you may dissociate in your everyday life. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so this test is the DES2. It is the Dissociative Experiences Scale II. Each question, and there are 28 of them, allows you to rate your experience from 0%, as in it never happens, to 100%, as in this happens all the time. And based on your answers, it will give you a score at the end. So question number 1, some people have the experience of driving or riding in a car or bus or subway and suddenly realizing that they don't remember what has happened during all or part of this trip. Select the number to show what percentage of times this happens to you. So I have that a lot. It actually happens way more than I would like, and it is kind of scary sometimes. So I'm going to put 70% for that. Some people find, number 2, some people find that sometimes they are listening to someone talk and they suddenly realize they did not hear part or all of what was said. We're going to put 90% for that one. Some people have the experience of finding themselves in a place and have no idea how they got there. Select the number to show what percentage of times this happens for you. Occasionally, so I'm going to do like 30% on that one. Some people have the experience of finding themselves dressed in clothes they don't remember putting on. I don't really have that. Maybe once in a great while, so we'll put 10%. Some people have the experience of finding new things among their belongings that they do not remember buying. I have gotten Amazon packages that I don't remember purchasing. And usually that is when I'm very tired or stressed. So we'll say about 40% on that one. Some people have the experience of feeling as though they are standing next to themselves or watching themselves do something, and they are actually seeing themselves as if they were looking at another person. That would be a depersonalization experience. And I don't really have that. I don't have that out of body thing where I'm watching myself. So I'm going to leave that one at 0%. Some people are told that they sometimes do not recognize friends or family members. That can also be facial blindness, which is pretty common among neurodivergents, but I don't really have that experience. I tend to recognize faces pretty well. I just don't remember names most of the time. So we'll leave that one at 0%. Some people find that they have no memory for some important events in their lives. For example, a wedding or graduation. I performed a wedding. I am a ordained minister. I performed a wedding in my backyard, and it was such a stressful experience. I don't remember any of it. I watched the video of myself performing the wedding. Don't remember doing it at all. So we're going to put that at about 70% because I do have a lot of very important events that happened in life that I just don't remember. Some people have experienced being accused of lying when they do not think they have lied. That happens to me a lot, and I'm going to say that's kind of a confusing question. I'm going to put 70% for me because I do have that experience a lot where someone, I think, misinterpreted something I said as a lie. I don't know. So number 11, some people have the experience of looking in a mirror and not recognizing themselves all the time. Again, that is depersonalization. So I'm going to put 90% for that one. Some people have the experience of feeling that other people, objects, and the world around them are not real. That's derealization. And yes, that happens pretty often to me as well. Like, is this even life? This is not my beautiful house. So yeah, we're going to put 70% for that one. Some people have the experience of feeling that their body does not seem to belong to them. 90% for that one. Some people have the experience of sometimes remembering a past event so vividly that they feel as if they were reliving that event. 90% for that one for me. Some people have the experience of not being sure whether things they remember happening really did happen or whether they just dreamed them. I have literally said this so many times. Did I do X, Y, and Z, or did I just dream that? So yeah, we're going to put 90% for that one for me. Some people have the experience of being in a familiar place, but finding it strange and unfamiliar. Yes, I have this feeling a lot as well. So 90%. Some people find that when they are watching television or a movie, they become so absorbed in the story, they are unaware of other events happening around them. 90%. Some people find that they become so involved in a fantasy or daydream that it feels as though it were really happening to them. That is called maladaptive daydreaming. And that's one of my go-to coping mechanisms. So we'll put 90%. Some people find that they sometimes are able to ignore pain. Yes, 90%. Some people find that they sometimes sit staring off into space, thinking of nothing, and are not aware of the passage of time. 90%. Some people, I'm only not putting 100% on these because it doesn't happen constantly, daily, but it is a very common experience for me. That's how I'm interpreting that scale. You may interpret it differently. Some people sometimes find that when they are alone, they talk out loud to themselves. That is 100% because I'm very rarely alone, but when I am talking to myself. I pretend that I'm talking to the dogs or the cats, but really it's to myself. Some people find that in one situation they may act so differently compared with another situation that they feel almost as if they were two different people. I'm going to say yes, that does happen to me because I feel like with masking and the personas that we put on, I do often handle things very differently in one situation than I would in another. So we'll say 80% for that because I'm not sure I'm interpreting that correctly. Some people sometimes find that in certain situations they are able to do things with amazing ease and spontaneity that would usually be difficult for them. For example, sports, work, social situations, etc. Again, with masking, sometimes things are easier because I'm pretending to be the responsible adult version of Heather. And then when I'm not masked, things are much more difficult. So we'll say about 70% on that. Some people sometimes find that they cannot remember whether they have done something or just thought about doing it. Let's say text messages. Did you respond to that text or did you just think about it? That happens. Oh my goodness. We'll say 90% of the time. Some people find evidence that they have done things that they do not remember doing. Yes. I'm going to say about 80% on that one. And do keep in mind, and I should have prefaced the test with this because we're almost done now, but do keep in mind, these experiences are experiences that happen when you are not under the influence of any drugs, when you are not drinking. These are just normal everyday experiences. And so this is to quantify like how often you dissociate, not necessarily if you have a drinking problem or you're doing some kind of psychotropic drugs or something like that that would cause you to forget doing things. Some people find writings, drawings, or notes among their belongings that they must have done but cannot remember doing. Occasionally, but usually it's something very old that I find that I just don't really have a good memory of. So we'll put 50%. Some people will sometimes find that they hear voices inside their head that tell them to do things or comment on things they are doing. Isn't that just an inner monologue? Does everybody not have that? Okay. All right. We'll put 80% because, yeah, I do. And I don't think that voice is somebody else. I don't think that voice is like, I'm not schizophrenic in that I hear voices telling me to do things that are not me. The voice is me. I know it's me. Some people sometimes feel as if they are looking at the world through a fog so that people and objects appear far away or unclear. Yeah. And I would say that now with perimenopause brain and the constant brain fog that I have, that is definitely an experience that I have pretty regularly. So we're going to go ahead and say 80%. So that was the end. That was 28 questions. And we will now hit the calculate results button. Oh my goodness, it's worse than it was the first time around. And I tried to be a little more forgiving of myself on this one. The first time I did it, I got a 63. And this time I got a 67.5. Now let's look at the explanation of the scores. High levels of dissociation are indicated by a score of 30 or more. Scores under 30 indicate low levels. 22. Successful treatment of a dissociative disorder should reduce the DES score when compared to the results before treatment began. Very high scores do not necessarily mean a more severe dissociative disorder is present. This is because the scale measures both normal and pathological dissociation. Dissociative identity disorder. Only 1% of people with dissociative identity disorder have been found to have a DES score below 30. A very high number of people whose score above 30 have been shown to have post-traumatic stress disorder or a dissociative disorder other than dissociative identity disorder. There are other dissociative disorders. And I mentioned a few types of dissociation as we were taking the test. There is depersonalization, when you don't feel present in your body, you don't recognize yourself in the mirror. There is derealization, where the world just doesn't feel real. Nothing in your experience feels like it's really happening. And there's maladaptive daydreaming, which was a huge go-to for me as a kid and carried on into adulthood. Maladaptive daydreaming is not like sitting at work and thinking, oh, I wish I was at the beach right now. It is, you create entire fantasy worlds in your head and live out those fantasy situations. And they are often more interesting than your regular life. Clinical use of the Dissociative Experiences Scale: if a person scores in the high range, above 30, then the DES questions can be used as the basis for clinical interview, with the clinician asking about the client to describe examples of experiences they have had for any questions about experiences which occur 20% of the time or more. I gave some examples of those experiences that I've had as I was doing the scoring. Alternately, the Dissociative Disorders Interview Schedule or structural clinical interview for dissociative disorders can be used to reach a diagnosis. Now, we're not going to dive that far into anything because, again, we're not trying to diagnose anything here. This is just a test to see how often you may have that dissociative response. At the bottom of the quiz, there is an average DES score in research, comparative levels of people that scored high or low based on their category. So we have a general adult population is about 5.4%. You can see I well exceed general adult population. Anxiety disorders, 7%. Affective disorders, like schizoaffective disorder, 9.35. Eating disorders, 15.8. Late adolescence, 16.6. Schizophrenia, 15.4. Borderline personality disorder, 19.2. Post-traumatic stress disorder, 31. Dissociative disorder not otherwise specified, 36. And dissociative identity disorder, 48. You can see the score I got well exceeds all of those. Again, though, I question whether or not some of the experiences that I rated very highly are true dissociative experiences, or whether or not they're an example of masking for me, because some of them I feel like they really were. Because I am different people in different places. I've learned to be different people in different places, to be a chameleon, to accommodate others, to not show who I really am for fear that I will be rejected, ostracized, whatever the case may be. So I'm not putting a whole lot of stock into this. You may be watching this and going, wow, she really needs to go get help. I am. I do have help. I have not been diagnosed with any sort of dissociative disorder. But I do know that dissociation and free state are go-to responses for my nervous system. So I found this really interesting. I hope that you found it interesting as well. And I would love to hear, if you took the test along with me, what your scores were in the comments, if you would like to share that. If this raised any interesting questions for you as you were going through the questions, because as I said, some of them, I don't know if it's really a true dissociative experience or if it is just a neurodivergent experience of masking, of having to pretend, of having to kind of check out from who you really are just to be able to exist in the everyday world. So I wonder if in a clinical setting, this may be adjusted for neurodivergent brains, because I feel like it probably should be, and that should be taken into account. So please take that into account if you were doing the test yourself. I really hope that you enjoyed this video and you found it helpful and informative. Again, if you did not take the test along with me and you just listened to the questions and you would like to do this for yourself and get the same score, I will put the link to this particular website in the description of the video so that you can go and check that out yourself, do it in your own time, and think a little bit about your answers. And I would have to say that I think that you would probably score differently on this at different parts of your life. If you have recently experienced trauma and you are constantly dissociating, you're probably going to answer those questions a little differently than you would if things were going great in your life and you haven't had any recent trauma. So I would be really interested to hear your results and what you thought of this assessment in the comments. And I thank you for joining me today. I hope that you enjoyed this. And if you did, I hope that you'll subscribe, like, leave me a comment, and come back for next week's video. Love you. Thank you. And I'll see you in the next one.